to win football games this year, but they've also found ways to lose pretty badly in some spots that made them look pretty ugly. So I think the Saints, if the weather's good, have a really good shot at really controlling that game and winning the game. So the Packers, they need the weather to be bad. They need it to be Lambeau, as I said earlier, historical Lambeau playoff environment, cold, frosty, snow, whatever. I think that plays to their advantage. If they don't get that and they get unseasonably warm weather or something like that, I think the Saints really, even despite being a 3 seed, I think they could roll the Packers.
I can't disagree with you there. Look, the Packers defense definitely improved. Some of the free agent signings they had, some of the draft picks that they had, they have come and played much better for that defense of what we've seen in the past. And then again, like you said, the emergence of Aaron Jones this year, what he's been able to do for this team, giving them a different element, not asking Rodgers to have to do as much. But Eric, even in that Lions game, he had 4 or 5 throws where he just missed. Off-target, inaccurate throws, and I don't know if that's on Rodgers, if it's on this receiving core with guys that he's just not used to playing with, guys that he doesn't trust, similar to the Brady issues. Again, we're not in the huddle. We're not in those practice teams. We're not watching the film. We don't know who's at fault. But it looks like when your wide receiver has 4 or 5 yards of separation and you sail it over his head, I can't see where that's always on the wide receiver and never on Aaron Rodgers. But again, we talked about this back in the offseason. We talked about it last year. Nothing sticks to Aaron Rodgers. He's got that ability where people think he is the greatest thrower of the football that we have today. Maybe not the greatest quarterback, but in terms of winning, and that being Brady, but in terms of just being able to spin it, make every throw, everybody always points to Rodgers, and it's always somebody else's fault. McCarthy, Ted Thompson, the way that the organization is structured, the players around him, his wide receivers, injuries, the defense. But what I saw was just a guy that was missing some throws. And if he does that versus the Lions, what's he going to do versus a good team? And the fact that that's really going to come back to bite him. So that would be my fear for them, is you just can't miss those throws. Whoever's fault it is, you can't do that, especially in the playoffs.
Well, what sticks to Aaron Rodgers, like you said, I mean, the Hail Mary moments, these 2-minute drives, these things like that. I mean, even on Danica Patrick's podcast, they talked about this idea that he is one of the best 2-minute drill quarterbacks in the history of the league. But that seems to be what saves the fact that, look, after Brett Favre leaves, Aaron Rodgers comes in and he's delivered 1 Super Bowl ring. You'd think the guy has as many as Tom Brady for as much as he's revered in this league. So to me, that's what's odd about Aaron Rodgers. And I think it's more of the mystique of what he's capable of doing more than what he's actually delivered.
Totally agree. And again, it's not that we don't like Rodgers or we don't want to see him succeed. It's the fact of what the media
him on the
has
Jets
done
tomorrow, but
the media builds him up again, like you said, to somebody that is a 3 or 4 time Super Bowl MVP. And he just doesn't have that on his resume right now. Some of that has got to be put back on him. It can't just always be somebody else's fault. You can't get all of the credit and none of the blame ever. It just shouldn't work that way. But somehow for Rodgers, it does. So, Eric, your Eagles, you thought they were dead. They've come back. They are hosting a wild card game. And somehow this team with a bunch of players that no one's ever heard of, being led by Carson Wentz and Boston Scott, of all people, they find themselves in the playoffs, and they're hosting the Seattle Seahawks. And Eric, of all the teams a couple of weeks ago, this would have looked like a game that was not going to be in the favor of the Eagles. Now you bring in a Seahawks team, and they've got a lot of injuries as well at some key spots, but they also have Russell Wilson. So has this Philadelphia team, Eric, have they been able to find a recipe to keep winning football games, especially with the playoff experience that this roster has over the last few years? Or is this where the ride ends for this team and Seattle takes them out?
They have a couple of things going for them that might save the season. Now, let's just talk about this week, because if they win this game and get to next week, that's a whole different story. But for this week, look, I watched that 49ers Seahawks game because of the fact that the one team I needed to win that game won the game so that the Seahawks would go play the Eagles. I think they have a chance against the Seahawks, but I think it's a small chance. This is Wentz's first playoff game as well. Although, give Wentz a lot of credit, he's now the first Eagles quarterback in history with 4,000 passing yards. And oh, by the way, he did it in a season where he doesn't have a one wide receiver with over 500 yards receiving. So, I mean, to me, that is just such an odd stat in the history of football that you got to give Wentz a little bit of credit. He also finished a season. He's healthy. He's going to be able to play the playoff games. So hopefully some of the naysayers with these chronic injuries and things like that will at least give Wentz enough credit to say, let's see what he can do in the playoffs. But they are holding it together. I mean, Peterson, again, he could be nominated for Coach of the Year just for the fact that this team is 9-7, won the division and got to the playoffs with right now a wide receiver leading the squad as a wide receiver one who used to be a quarterback in high school. This team is unbelievable. Then they've got Scott, who was similar to what we talked about with some of the other teams. He was a fourth stringer practice squad guy when they started the year. They're using all they've got. I think if Sanders plays well, if Scott does what he's done in the past couple weeks has been phenomenal. He's just given them a spark in certain spots on the field that they've really needed. And then if Wentz can do what Wentz has somehow done, just deliver the ball to whoever's name is on the back of the jersey and find a way, I think they have a chance. Now, their defense is particularly bad, and I think that's where they suffer when it comes to a guy like Russell Wilson, because I think he's the great unknown here. Yeah, the Seahawks have battled some of the same things. Yeah, the Seahawks don't have the same defense, the 12th man. Well, they're in Philadelphia anyway, but they don't have the Legion of Boom and everything else that they've sort of had the past decade or so. And so they're a different team as well. I think this game can be won by the Eagles, but Justin, it's not going to surprise me if the Eagles do have one of the games like they had 7 times this year where you shake your head and go, I don't know what to tell you, and the Seahawks blow them out or something. It's just, they've done all they can do. And if they win this game, great, but I'm not even going to be upset if they don't.
How concerned are you with Wentz's lack of playoff experience versus what Russell Wilson has?
Normally I would be, but in this game, I don't think it matters. I mean, maybe it does from the standpoint that Russell Wilson is playing on the road, and I think he might have that poise and that experience to, get through that. But Wentz is playing at home, so it's not like he's going on the road in an adverse environment. He's at his home stadium. He's in the link. He's got the home crowd behind him. He just has to go out there and play football. His biggest challenge is what's on the field around him, quite honestly. I don't think it's necessarily the lack of playoff experience, at least in this first round.
I think that would be my only concern, is just what Russell Wilson can do. And look, what Carson Wentz has had to do, and we talked about it. I was not in favor of the Eagles jumping out, giving him that huge extension, just because I felt like he hasn't proved it. But he's shown a lot, because he's been able to get this team to win despite not having anything around him, and even losing Zach Ertz and not having him as his favorite target, not having that security blanket there. And they were still able to move the ball. Again, it was the Giants, but hey, you're in a situation where you're win or go home, because you can look at the scoreboard and see what Dallas was doing to Washington. So that's where some of the excuses that Brady is getting with his wide receivers. And it's like, guys, he's got Julian Edelman. He's got Sanu. He's got N'Keal Harry. He's got Myers. I know he might not have a tight end, but I think Carson Wentz would probably give his left arm to get those receivers right now, based on what he's got. Guys that have, at some points, didn't even have NFL snaps.
Yeah, sure.
And he's had to go out with his back against the wall. And look, Philly put themselves in that spot because they didn't play well early when guys were healthy, but they found a way when they had to win. And I think that means something. And momentum is everything in the playoffs, no matter what sport it is, but especially the NFL. When you find a formula to win football games, no matter what it looks like to the public, that's all that matters. And this team in Philadelphia, they're at home. They're about a 1.5 to 2 point underdog in this game. But Eric, I still think that this is a team that we saw when they played that underdog tag, that mantra that they had a couple years ago. It worked for them. There's nothing to say that they can't do that again. That everybody thinks that they're a 9-7 team and they have no reason to be there. They shouldn't be there. It should be Dallas who's there. They're the better team. They've got better players, and Wentz is unproven. They could do all of those narratives for this team. And I absolutely think with what Seattle has, with losing Carson, losing Penny, you're bringing Marshawn Lynch off the street, who hasn't played football for a while. I mean, people can make all the stuff he wants. And yes, at the goal line and things like that, he could be a difference maker, but he's not the same as what they could do with Carson and Penny. And even when you start to talk about the different protection packages and things like that, where you had to see they had to go with the young guy a lot more than Marshawn, even on Sunday night versus the Niners.
Yeah, so I noticed that. That was interesting.
There's a lot of different elements. And look, you've got Jim Schwartz. I would have to think he's going to have a couple different wrinkles. Again, you talked about with the Eagles. The scary thing is what Seattle can do with Lockett and what they've done with Metcalf. And this Eagles secondary has been exploited throughout the year. And those are guys that can absolutely take the top off the defense. They can play that. They can do a lot. We'll lock it in the return game, what we've seen that Metcalf can do in the red zone. So that would be the biggest fear that I think Seattle can bring. But Eric, I think that this is probably the best situation for the Eagles, just playing a Seattle team that's beat up. They're coming off. They're going to be traveling again, west to east. They're coming off that big game against the Niners. I think it's a game that the Eagles could absolutely win. It would not shock me at all now to see this team win. A couple weeks ago with Seattle, it might have surprised me. But what I've seen with Seattle, even going to Carolina, they couldn't really get away from the Panthers. They didn't look very good in week 16. They come back. They fell behind. They could have easily gotten trounced by the Niners, and they fought back in that game. So I think it's a game that Philly can definitely win. So I know you'll be on the edge of your seat, and next week we'll be able to talk about those games, recap them, talk about what the divisional round will look like. But Eric, before we get out of here, I was getting ready to pull up my notes, and I refreshed my phone, and the little red line came up on ESPN for breaking news. And the news we've been waiting for, and actually one of the reasons we pushed the show back to Thursday night, is what the Cowboys were going to do with Jason Garrett. And it looks like they've made the decision not to bring Jason Garrett back, not to offer him extension, and to move on from Jason Garrett. So this is something that should make Cowboy fans very happy. It's something they've been calling for the whole season, even dating back to last year. This is a move that most Cowboy fans, I think, probably too late in happening. But reading some of the excerpts of the story and what was broken to Ed Werder was that Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, they really tried to show an abundance of respect to Jason Garrett. Really, with Jerry Jones, this seemed like it was a tough decision just based on the relationship he had with Jason Garrett, even going back to Jason Garrett's dad. You think of Jason Garrett being a backup with this team. They had Jason Garrett part of even the coaching staff meetings back then, grooming him for this spot. He's the second longest tenured coach for this Cowboys organization. So definitely not an easy decision for Jerry Jones. But Eric, was this the right decision? And was this really the only decision that Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones could make?
Yeah, I think ultimately when you see a team that lost 3 games in a row to get to a point where they were allowing the embattled Eagles to take over and win that division at 9-7, you see a team that really feels like they could have been 10-6 had they not lost some of those games late in the year. And I think that was the beginning of the end, really, for Jason Garrett. Now, we've talked on the show about the fact that he's been the Cowboys coach since 2010 and has delivered really only 3 playoff wins. And he's even been a coach during a period of time where you've had Romo, you've had Des Bryant, now you've had Dak and Ezekiel, and even that good run they both had in their rookie seasons where you felt like there was momentum there to do something more. And it just seems like there's just not enough to get over the hump in Dallas with Jason Garrett. And I think the time has just come where you have to move on. I know it's a personal thing. I know there's ties there, but anytime you mix business and personal, family, you get in a situation where you might not be making the right moves for your organization. And I think they got to that point in Dallas where you want to give the guy respect. You want to hold on to him. You want to give him every chance. But at the end of the day, Jerry Jones has expectations for this Dallas Cowboys franchise. Obviously, with the money he's put into the team, the money he's put into this beautiful stadium, just the whole notion that this is America's team and having relatively no playoff success over the past 10 years just means that it's time. And unfortunately, I think that, if you're, I say unfortunately, but you know what? Really, if you're a Cowboys fan, this is fortunately for you because this was necessary. This was the time that you had to make this move. We're going to talk in a minute how the Redskins, I believe, are getting better. The Giants are going to make a coaching move at some point. Philadelphia, I think, is a very solid coach, and Peterson got everything he could out of that team. So look, this is the NFC East. This is a tough division and should be for years to come with the young quarterbacks that are going to be in this league. Jason Garrett's just not the right guy for the job anymore.
And Eric, this wasn't like Jason Garrett had 2 years with the organization and you're kind of waffling on what to do if you go for continuity or if you go for a new voice. He's been there long enough where they just haven't had that success.